Hello and welcome to an old MKM draft video. I'm Paul Cheon, and now that the road to rank 1, at least for MKM, is over, I'm trying to mix things up and try to mix up the content a little bit. And today, what I wanted to do is something a little bit different. I wanted to revisit my first 2 drafts of MKM and see what I said about this previously, and then react to that and see what I would take now. Additionally, I'm going to give myself kind of a letter grade after each draft to see just how well I feel that I navigated the draft after watching me make my picks. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of moments where we're going to be like, oh, can't believe he took that pick. And I'm hoping that that's the case. I haven't reviewed these videos in a very long time. I stopped it here right at the beginning of my very first draft at Bronze 4. Let's see how the draft goes. Let's take a look at some of these cards here. Delny Streetwise Lookout, 3 mana 2/2. Creatures you control with power 2 or less can't be blocked. If an ability of a creature you control with power 2 or less triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. Creature you control with power 2. Okay. There's a blue-white Surveil. Ooh, that's a cool one. It taps. It gives you some mana here. Let's go. This one makes a creature bigger. This one is a blue-red, 2 mana 1/1 flyer. Enters the battlefield. Investigate. When you sack an art. Oh yeah. I think I want to take that. It's a 2 mana 1/1 flyer. When you sack an artifact, it gets +1/+1. That's definitely something I'm interested in. 6 mana creed 3 1/1 Thopter Surveil. That's okay. And then I imagine this uncommon is going to be better than any of these other commons that I'm going to want to take. I don't see a super Oh no, there's Galvanize. If you draw 2 or more cards, it deals 5 damage to that creature instead. So actually, Galvanize. Okay, well. As you can see there, I literally, for this one, I definitely didn't do my practice. I definitely didn't look at the spoilers before the draft. So I was very new to kind of what all the cards were. So this one's going to be a tough draft. You're going to see me read a lot of the cards. And kind of going back to that pick here, now that we look at this, I think it's a pretty clear Neighborhood Guardian first pick, right? Neighborhood Guardian is fantastic. It gives you a little more flexibility. Certainly the best white card out of this pack. Gleaming Geardrake, though, I know I've been doing a lot better with blue-red recently, so I wouldn't necessarily fault you for going Gleaming Geardrake. I just think it's a lot less flexible than taking something like a Neighborhood Guardian or a Fuss Bother. But starting with the Gleaming Geardrake definitely gives you a little bit of direction as to kind of where you want to go. Greenbelt Radical. When it's turned face up, put 3 a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Creature control get trampled until end of turn. 4 mana 4/4. Sure. Corner Crook. When it enters the battlefield, you can sack an artifact. Then you can deal 3 damage to anything. Living Conundrum. If you draw a card while you skip that draw instead, as long as there are no cards in your library. Okay, that's not a card you want to play. Possibility Storm. I know is not that great. You investigate. Okay, yeah, I'm going to take the Galvanize here. You can't go too wrong with just 2 mana kill anything, along with this Gleaming Geardrake that I really want to make work. But again, also, first picking a gold card is probably not what you want to do. In all honesty, we probably should have started with double Galvanize. But let's hope that this Mistway Spy is... All right, well, old Paul from a couple of months ago, definitely saying something that I would say now, which is first picking a gold card is generally not something that you really want to be doing. That being said, Gleaming Geardrake did end up becoming the best uncommon in the set. So, you know, if you're going to take a gold card, that's probably the best one to take, especially at uncommon. And following that up with the Galvanize definitely makes sense there. Good. When it's turned face up, whenever creature you control deals combat damage to a player, investigate. Well, that's interesting. So it's a 1 mana 1/1 flyer, which you almost never want to play. But for the disguise cost, you can get an extra investigate. That seems okay. Moving on to some of the other stuff, let's take a look at some of the green cards. 5 mana 5/5 with some upside. There's a basic land cycler. This one makes a 2/2, and then this one doesn't seem especially good. Cost 3 less if you've sacrificed an artifact this turn, deals 4 damage to target creature. I'm going to take this Mistway Spy. It doesn't look especially powerful to me, but I want to investigate this archetype. Okay. Look, it's the first day of the format. I'm allowed to make some pretty bad jokes. Anyways, with that pack, I don't think Mistway Spy is the pick there. I just think overall, this card just ended up being a little bit underwhelming. Just 1 mana for a 1/1 flying body is not great, obviously. And when you flip this up, you're spending 5 mana to flip over a 1/1. So this is only really good if you have a bunch of flyers and you can at least guarantee getting 2 hits with this creature. So I think in those instances, it's playable. But I think in that pack, I likely would have just speculated on something like a Topiary Panther, just to give me options at going kind of a multicolor green deck. Although I think at the time, I wasn't really sure that there was a multicolor deck that existed. So it makes sense that I take the Mistway Spy there. And see how good this actually is. Because obviously if you can flip this up, sack some artifacts, the Gleaming Geardrake can also get big. So why don't we start with this and just see how the rest of the draft can go. Out cold. This freezes 2 creatures, so if you want to be a tempo style deck, that's pretty good. Eliminate the impossible. 2 mana Investigate. Creatures your opponents control get -2/-0 end of turn. If any of them are suspected, they're no longer suspected. That seems interesting. For each of X target permanents, create X tokens that are copies of that permanent. So for 5 mana, you get to copy something. For 8 mana, you get to copy 2 things. I think I'm reading that correctly. I'm going to just take all the Investigate cards. That's my plan. I'm going to take all the Investigate cards. Oh no. The first gigantic mistake that I made. Oh my gosh. Doppelgang, I think among top players, ended up becoming the 3rd best rare in the set, or 4th. It's in the top 5. This card is absolutely bananas, and I think a lot of people misread this card like I did at the beginning. When I read this card, I thought it was 5 mana copy a thing. I thought it was 8 mana copy 2 things. I did not know that it was 8 mana copy 2 things twice, right? So if you think about it, when you're spending 8 mana to copy 2 things, that seems okay. But when you're making 4 permanents for 8 mana, that's what made this card completely ridiculous. So obviously I should have taken the Doppelgang to go with that Topiary Panther, and we would have been setting ourselves up really nicely for a multicolored, maybe a teamer deck with the Doppelgang. That would have been way, way better than taking Eliminate the Impossible, which wasn't even the best blue card in the pack. I should have taken the Out Cold, right? It was either Out Cold over Eliminate. Then I could have taken, Doppelgang, and had I wanted to consider a green card, Get a Leg Up, Bite Down on Crime, blue-green definitely felt like the seat to be. But of course, we were still starting things out, and after probably first picking that Gleaming Geardrake, I think we just kind of put our blinders on and kind of went with it. But yes, this is definitely the worst pick of the draft so far. I can't imagine a pick being worse than this one. Yeah, I should have done an untimed one, but it's okay. Look, the first draft is going to be kind of awkward, but look, we're kind of on even footing with most other people. Look, I'm going to take Galvanize. 2 mana, 3 damage, kill something. Let's go. 2 copies of that. Definitely good. This is a counterspell. You can suspect up to 1 creature. That's fine. No More Lies is an okay uncommon if I'm blue-white. And Fey Flight is another flash combat trick. It gives something hexproof and gives it flying. That's a really great combat trick, actually. That's a real... No, it's not. It's not a great combat trick. This card actually looks way better than it was, and Fey Flight ultimately ended up being not a great combat trick, but I think we're going to take the Galvanize here, and that's a totally fine pick here, of course. Really great variation on combat trick. I can see why it's uncommon, but I think the 2 mana unconditional removal spell is going to be better. And then if I can find ways to draw cards, if I can, for example, sack a clue token, then this deals 5 damage. So this already looks to me like it's probably going to be one of the best commons in the set. I mean, 2 mana, 3 damage, instant speed is always going to be good. Let's take a look at some of the other cards. I already have an Eliminate the Impossible. I think the removal spell is better. The Bubble Smuggler is okay. It gives you a mana sink late in the game. There's a Curious Cadaver, which gives you pretty good value, but I'm just going to keep taking all... Look, if they're going to keep passing me Galvanizes, I'm going to take them all. All right, so... Yeah, look, if you just keep getting past Galvanizes, clearly that's something that you could be looking to do. We could have maybe even ended up looking to go a direction where we're red, green, splash, blue. But I think the Galvanize there certainly makes a lot of sense. Also note that this is, week 1 of the format, so nobody really understood that red-white was the best color combination. Obviously, Neighborhood Guardian, there should be no way that Neighborhood Guardian should still be in this pack. I don't think it was the pick for us, but it doesn't... Right now, of course, you're going to be looking at this like, why the heck is Neighborhood Guardian in here? It was like the first day this set was out on Arena, so that makes a lot of sense. But yes, triple Galvanize, still an incredible way to start the draft. All right, next pack here. I'm going to take them all. It's not clear that blue's open though. It might be green, but we'll take it one at a time here. Hotshot Investigators enters the battlefield. Return up to 1 of the target creature you control to its owner's hand. If you controlled it, investigate. That seems really slow. I don't think I'm that interested in that. Are any of these green cards good? This bite card is probably good. There was that white. All right, so out of that pack, it was pretty clearly Bite Down on Crime versus Flourishing Bloomkin. And had we taken the Doppelgang out of that pack, we definitely just take the Flourishing Bloomkin, just because this is something that acts as a 2-drop in the early game, and do not take that for granted. I've played this turn 2 many, many times. It's part of what makes this card so great, and the fact that it gets you multiple lands to help you cast the Doppelgang definitely would have slammed Flourishing Bloomkin out of this pack. But I've been seeing a lot more green cards. As an additional cost, you may collect evidence 6. This spell costs 2 less for each evidence that was collected. Target creature you control gets +2/+0. It deals damage equal to its power. So it's a big bite effect. What else do we have here? ETB, mill 3, return lands, not interested. Surveil, 3 mana. This is, by the way, me just turbo reading through the cards and trying to figure out what works and what doesn't. I will take the Undercover Crocodile, because even in my blue-red deck, I can still play this as a morph or a disguise card, and then unmorph it for 3 blue-blue. I like how after 2 months, I still call the disguise creatures morphs. I'm just old and can't get it out of my head. Crocodile is certainly a fine option out of that pack, but I think we could have definitely considered some other cards there. I think the Aftermath Analyst would have been a pretty good consideration. I'm not super huge on Sample Collector, unless you're looking to be kind of more aggressively slanted. It's okay, but it definitely ended up being a little bit worse than I thought it'd be. Aftermath Analyst is quite good, especially if you're going to be blue-green. It gives you a way to ramp. It gives you a decent 2-drop to block with. So in decks that's looking to cast cards like Doppelgang, it's nice. Obviously, there's the downside of maybe the fact that you can mill your Doppelgang, but I think Undercover Crocodile might be replaceable enough where you can just go ahead and take the Aftermath Analyst, because if you do end up in blue-green, self-mill is pretty good just for collecting evidence, and of course the mana ramp could be a welcome addition to this deck. Taking a look here, what do we have? Enters the battlefield under your control, and whenever a detective you control is turned face up, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. Does blue-red have a lot of detectives? That's one. Is this Gear Drake a detective? I don't know, but I'm going to take it, and yeah, I like the Projector Inspector pick there. I think if we end up going down blue-green splash red for triple galvanize, I think Projector Inspector is awesome in blue-green specifically, just because having a way to loot and fill up your graveyard for all the investigate payoff cards in blue-green makes a lot of sense. Out Cold is a very good card, and it might even have a higher win rate, I'm not sure, than Projector Inspector in blue-green. But because we already have a lot of interaction with the triple galvanize here and the bite down on crime, and even to eliminate the impossible, we just don't necessarily need another spell. I'd much rather have the creature out of that pack. Maybe we're going to be the detective deck. Return target non-land permanent. So this is a bounce spell with Surveil 1. That used to be good way back in the day. Other than that, it's a 5-mana 2/5 hexproof. Yeah, I don't know what this card's supposed to do. It's a 5-mana 2/5 hexproof. I'm going to take this bounce spell. Not sure that I'm going to play this bounce. Yeah, so Unauthorized Exit actually ended up being quite good. Part of it is just the fact that when you're playing a format where a lot of people are investing a lot of mana into their disguise creatures, particularly when they flip over something large, right? Not the ones that make a token, but I'm talking about the Crocodiles, the Riftburst Hellions. When you can use Unauthorized Exit to bounce one of those cards, it's just such a gigantic tempo swing. It's almost, I would say that it's just worth the full card there in that instance. And of course, this is also a format where combat tricks are very good. And Unauthorized Exit is one of the nice, cheap, efficient ways to help kind of go over the top of any opposing combat tricks that your opponents may have. So it ended up overperforming based on my initial impressions. I think definitely the first copy is something that I'm interested in having in my deck. That being said, I did have triple galvanize here already. So given that I already have a lot of interaction, I might have actually just looked to take Vengeful Creeper out of that pack. I do really like the first copy of Vengeful Creeper as well, and we're a little bit light on creatures so far. But Unauthorized Exit is totally fine. Spell because I already have triple galvanize, but it is an okay trick to play. So that pack, the previous pack had Undercover Crocodile and Aftermath Analyst. That's ridiculous. So blue-green, clearly the color combination to be in. Still ended up with taking a bunch of these red cards. And look at this pack. Get a leg up and out cold tabling. Definitely would have taken get a leg up out of this pack. Get a leg up ended up being probably the best combat trick or one of the best combat tricks in the pack. At the time, I didn't know that. So I just took the blue card because I still thought I was likely going to be blue-red. And I was probably treating the Undercover Crocodilfs as a blue card, not even considering going into green. So I guess it makes sense given that if I think that I'm blue-red, I want to take this card. But definitely, if I did this draft again, I would have taken the get a leg up here. And we would have had a really, really great blue-green base, splashing red potentially for the removal spells. But this is looking okay, I want to say, probably. But no draft can be too wrong starting out with triple galvanize. I took some blue cards, but none of them look especially powerful. Don't think I'm going to be green. I think I'm probably going to settle into blue-red, and I'm not seeing a whole lot of fixing here. So it's telling me that this set is likely not going to be something that you want to go 3 colors that often. Sanguine Savior is a really, really nice creature. How wrong was I about that? This is a format where you can go 5 colors if you wanted to, with Gravestone Strider, Nervous Gardener, They Went This Way, Topiary Panther, Escape Tunnel. I was super, super wrong about that. Sure, if you're white-black, 3 mana, 2/1 Flying Lifelink is really, really tough to race. This is just your classic discard a card, draw 2 card effect, which we're not interested in. What do we want out of this pack? What does this do? Massacre Girl. 4 mana, 4/4 menace. Creatures you control have Wither. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, if its toughness was less than 1, draw a card. Okay. Concealed Weapon. Let's try taking the Concealed Weapon because it's on color. It's turn face up attached. Okay. So Concealed Weapon ended up being pretty bad and definitely something that I shouldn't take out of this pack. I also probably saw the fact that this is an artifact and ended up taking it. Had I were I to do this again, if I was what I am now, a blue-red deck, I probably would have just taken another copy of the Out Cold. If I felt like I need a 2-drop, I could consider this Annotation Automaton. So that's kind of where I would have gone. Now, obviously, if we continue drafting our busted Doppelgang deck, I think you could make a pretty strong case for 2 cards. There's Nervous Gardener, which is great, allows us to splash red, but there's also Commercial District. So this really just comes down to how many 2-drops that we have. I think you should probably lean towards the Nervous Gardener here. But the Commercial District allows you to splash for the red cards. On top of that, it is a Forest Duel, which is really big to note because we had that Flourishing Bloomkin. So by taking the Commercial District, the Flourishing Bloomkin actually acts as a red source as well. So it makes that pick a lot closer. I'm not exactly sure. I think the safer pick is just to take the Nervous Gardener, just because you do get to have that flexibility of having a 2, but it's very tempting to take that Commercial District. And had I had, let's say, 10 or 11 playables coming into this pack, I would definitely consider the land here. Actually, no, I'm going to take this red-green Surveil land because it's just... Never mind. Good swap, Paul. Good swap. You tricked me and everybody else watching. It's the Scry land that you can play in your deck, which I think is good, and I think there is a chance we might splash green. So let's just take that. There was really no great blue or red cards in that pack for us. What do we have here? When it enters battlefield, you lose 3 life. Not interested in that. There's a blue-white land as well. Makeshift Binding. Exile target creature and opponent controls and you gain 2 life. That's a great removal spell. When it's dealt 3 or more damage, investigate. Okay. Behind a Mask. I wonder if I take this Granite Witness. It is double blue to untap, which is a lot. So I think I'm probably just going to take this white removal spell on the splash. All right. Given where we're at there, this is a very clear Granite Witness. Not the Makeshift Binding. You can't really splash very well in blue-red. We don't have any escape tunnels or anything like that. Granite Witness is a totally fine creature. This card ended up being one of the best disguise creatures in the format for a reason. Just because if you're blue or white, you don't have to be blue-white. This card is just awesome because the tap effect is very relevant. It hits really hard as a 3-power flyer as well. So that definitely would have been the pick. Now, of course, if we were looking to continue being green and make sure we had the mana fixing, the pick here would have been the Nervous Gardener. But with our blue-red deck, definitely the Granite Witness is the pick here. All right, next pack. Unlikely that it makes our deck unless we get some good blue-white fixing. But yeah, we're not really seeing a whole lot of red cards, even though we didn't pass that many red cards here. Escape Tunnel. Sacrifice Escape Tunnel. Search your library for a basic land card. So this is an Evolving Wilds, but strictly better, which is kind of interesting. I might just take that unless this uncommon is good. When this case enters a battlefield, investigate. To solve, you control 3 or more artifacts. Sack this case, put 4+1/+1 counters on target non-artifact creature. Ooh. When it enters battlefield, investigate. Okay. Actually, I'm kind of in for that. Okay. Yeah, Case of the Filch Falcon. If you're playing a deck that's capable of making a lot of artifacts, I like taking it. The pick could have still just been Projector Inspector in the blue-red deck that I was looking to draft. I mean, we have a Gleaming Geardrake, but we don't have any satchels. So I don't know how strongly I feel about that. I really do like Projector Inspector a lot, especially in blue-red, where kind of you could potentially flood out and you don't have a lot of expensive things to do unless you have the satchel. So probably looking to take that. Now, if I want it to be the blue-green deck, I think it's a little bit closer, actually, between the Inspector and the Eavesdropper. Depending on our curve, could still see taking the Inspector there, but Eavesdropper would have also been a consideration out of this pack. I kind of want to see how far I can push the blue-red Investigate theme, and I think Case of the Filched Falcon kind of is what you want to be doing. And there's Shock. There's Shock and Galvanized? That seems kind of interesting. Detective Satchel. It's gold. And it's blue-red. I'm going to take it. Here, check this out. I'm going to just take it and just not even read the card until afterwards. What the hell? What are you doing? You know what it was? I was reading all the cards and I just kind of got sick of reading everything. And I was just like, blue-red, this has to be a Signpost uncommon. It has to be great. Turns out it was. Turns out it was by far the best pick out of that pack in any configuration, but I just think it's kind of funny that we're just like, I'm just going to take it without even reading what the card actually did. Okay, I'll read the card now. I assume it's good. When it ETBs, investigate twice. I'm in for that. Create a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact token with flying. Activate only if you sacrifice an artifact this turn. So if I can make a lot of clues, then I can start using this to just pump out 1/1 flyers every turn. That seems awesome to me. Sudden Setback. It's a bounce spell. I think I just want this blue-red Surveil land, though. I can't imagine something better. It's turn face up. Create a 1/1 Thopter with flying. Yeah, that's a decent creature, but I'm going to just take the blue-red duel here. Yeah, so I think that one was kind of close. Thundering Falls between the Gadget Technician. Gadget Technician is obviously premium, especially if you're specifically in blue-red, because playing it face up turn 4 to make a 1/1 is quite nice. If we're interested, but Thundering Falls is also really, really good. It looks like we're pretty good on number of playables, so I don't think there's anything wrong with taking the Thundering Falls out of that pack. Now, if we were still looking to be the blue-green deck splashing the red, then certainly Thundering Falls makes a lot more sense, and we would definitely slam that card so that we can splash our satchels / galvanizes. Yeah, duel with Surveil? Absolutely. All day, every day. Candlestick. Equip creature gets +1/+1, and when it attacks, Surveil 2, sack to draw a card. Seems fairly replaceable. If this attacks and is not suspected, you may suspect it. Seems replaceable. I think I'm probably going to want this card. When it enters a battlefield or attacks, you may sack an artifact. So basically, you can cash in on a clue for free, and maybe that could be okay as just a top-end card. Very, very correct. Very, very correct. Now, yeah, green was definitely flowing here. That's another Eavesdropper. So we would have had an incredible teamer setup here. But if y'all want to be blue-red artifacts, the Criminologist to go with the satchel and all the different investigate things that we have makes a lot of sense. Maybe not. We'll see. Crime Novelist. When you sack an artifact, put a +1/+1 counter on Crime Novelist and add red. I mean, look, we're looking to sack a bunch of artifacts. This seems like another build-around type card in our blue-red strategy here, so why don't we take that as well? All right, so that was the first trap card. Crime Novelist looked promising. You look at that card, you're like, well, 3 mana, 1/3 body, okay. I mean, if I just sack one clue, it's probably fine. It ended up being pretty bad. It looks like a card where you look at it and you go, man, this is definitely an uncommon that I want to put in my blue-red investigate deck. And it turns out you probably don't. You need to have a lot of ways to make a bunch of clues, maybe a ton of satchels to make it work. And more often than not, this card just ended up being not that exciting. The thing is, the only way this card actually ends up being actively good in your deck is if you can sack 2 artifacts, and that's a pretty big ask. That's a pretty big ask. So it ended up being definitely an underperformer. And again, that was a pack where we had a Bite Down on Crime and a Vitu-Ghazi Inspector. All the value. And Hustle and Bustle. I like the name of the card. Target creature attacks or blocks if able. Creatures you control get +2/+2 and trample until end of turn. It doesn't seem very good for what we want to do. Oh, there's another crime novelist. Okay, let's do this. Let's take everything that says investigate on it and see how that works, right? Oh, why? Paul, that's the biggest trap ever. What are you doing? Double crime novelist. I mean, in theory, it looks kind of sweet, right? How many ways do we have to make clues? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I guess we have 5 ways to make clues. Something like that. But I mean, look at this pack now. Oh, there's a Nervous Gardener 9th pick. No respect. And this also means that the Criminologist is nice because it just allows you to sack artifacts really cheaply. Is it sack only? Okay, sack. I don't think I'm a tempo deck. I think I might need a 2-drop, so I'll just take the Jaded Analyst. How do you trigger it? When you draw your second card each turn. So when you sack a clue, for example. But sacking a clue might be too big of a cost. Yeah, so I mean, there obviously you just take the Sanitation Automaton. It's another artifact. The Jaded Analyst ended up being pretty bad. With a couple of Projector Inspectors, it can have some value, but especially when we also have Case of the Filched Falcon, it just makes a lot of sense to just play as many artifacts as you can to try to turn that on. Because Case of the Filched Falcon can be very powerful, you just need to make sure that, if possible, when you have the option, you take all the artifact creatures that you see. Granite Witness, I'll take the Innocent Bystander. Granite Witness, the double blue scares me, so I don't really want to take it. Yeah, that was an easy Granite Witness. We should have taken that the first time, and we didn't take it on the wheel, so that was a giant error. Giant error. Look at this pack, by the way. Chases on Out Cold Eavesdropper with 3 cards left. Goodness. This is an okay combat trick. It does investigate, so it might be worth considering. And I'll just take another Criminologist. Okay, so we have more than enough playables here. It's just a question. The real question is, are these playables good? Yeah. So I mean, we're just tabling all kinds of stuff. Now that we've played this format for a couple of months, we know that anything with Investigate is basically playable. And having a pack with 3 cards that all say Investigate on it, obviously took a little bit of time for people to figure that out. But yeah, I mean, last pick Vengeful Creeper. Come on, folks. Come on, right? Do they work out here? Because we're already looking at 22 cards with 2 lands, but I'm sure some of these expensive cards like this Undercover Crocodelph, wow, they went deep on these card names, might not be good enough. When it deals combat damage, it doesn't seem that bad. Seems like decent filler. All right, what does Kellen do? Blue-green Investigate, you may play an extra land. 4 mana, 3/4 Flying Vigilance. When it attacks, destroy up to 1 target artifact. If you control that permanent, draw a card. That seems really sweet. Do I want Fuss and Bother? No. I'm going to take this Kellen, and now I'm going to try to splash this Kellen. It's a rare. You got to try the rare. And we have 2 lands already. All right. Well, look. Splashing the Kellen is completely fine, but Fuss and Bother would have been totally fine in this blue-red deck. So in this blue-red deck in particular, I think you're still just supposed to take Fuss Bother. It's also just a really excellent card to play in your deck. We can play both halves of it. But of course, in our blue-green deck as well, we would have taken the Kellen. So, hey, look, you can't fault somebody for taking a rare on the first day to see how good it is, right? You can't fault them. So this doesn't seem too hard. Just a splash for 4 mana, 3/4 Flying with Vigilance seems worth it to me. So I'm going to take that there. This is Gearbane Orangutan. ETBs kill as an artifact or sack an artifact. If you do, put 2 +1/+1 counters on it. That's really nice. If I can sack a clue token and make a 3 mana 4/4 reach, that's interesting. This is a rare though. When performer or another creature controls turn face up, that creature deals damage equal to its power to each opponent. Okay, so it's a 2 mana 3/2 with some upside. It deals 3 damage to target creature and opponent controls. I think I'm going to take this one. This is a 2 mana 3/2, and it hurts them a lot, but I assume that there's more There's more things about this card that's interesting. If you solve it, sack this case, exile the top 3 cards, you may choose one. Yeah, so it's a 3 mana, kill a thing, and then you use it to get value later on in the game. That seems excellent. So Case of the Burning Masks is fine. It's a good card. It's a good card. Now, the thing is with this deck in particular, we're not really great at being able to flip this card that easily. We are also in the market for 2-drops, right? We had a Gear Drake, a Jaded Analyst, but we don't have a lot of 2s. And this was my issue early on in the format, and I was getting run over a lot because I didn't realize just how fast and tempo oriented this format was going to be. So I didn't put as high a priority on cheap things to play. Now, that being said, we did have Triple Galvanize, right? Triple Galvanize plus Gear Drake plus Bystander, what have you. But, I mean, Pyrotechnic Performer ended up being an incredible wear and something that I should definitely slam here over something like a Case of the Burning Mess. I mean, the card is just absolute. I've been just burned out from 20 to like, that thing's done like 12 damage to me in a game before. So definitely Performer was the pick out of that pack. And I just took a rare before. I don't understand why I didn't take the rare again. And now we're looking at enters the battlefield, tap enchant a creature, it doesn't untap. Okay. I think I'm going to have enough playables though, and effects like this have traditionally not been that great, although this does allow you to permanently kill the creature. But I think I'm interested in this Evolving Wilds here, or Escape Tunnel rather, because I do have this Kellen here. So I just, by having this and playing 1 forest, that gives us 3 green sources for Kellen. Expedited Interference. Whenever a creature is dealt damage, its controller may exile that many cards from the top of their library. They may play, oh, it goes both ways? No, thank you. Let's take a random I have 2 of these already, but it still seems better than this. Although this is a 2-drop, I guess. I'll just take another Crocodile, I guess. Yeah, so in that instance, I think you just have to take the Bubble Smuggler. Bubble Smuggler is just better than a card like the Innocent Bystander or the Jaded Analyst, so definitely want to upgrade it on our 2-mana creatures there and just take the Bubble Smuggler. We already have the double Crocodile, so I don't think we want number 3. Probably not playing all of them. Ooh, what is this? At the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on each colorless creature you control or cloak a card from your hand. I want to try it. It's got to be better than Red Herring. Murder is incredible, but we can't really play it. I'm not too interested in a second copy of Unauthorized Exit. And whenever opponent sacrifices an artifact, this deals 2 damage to them. And we're not looking to be that aggressive there. So we're going to take the Vannifar here. 5th pick Vannifar, 4th pick Doppelgang. Remember my one video where I was like, my best draft deck ever? This could have been that. We would have had Kellen, Vannifar, and Doppelgang. Oh my gosh. I mean, at least we took the Vannifar, and with the mana the lands that we took, we're setting up for the splash. But obviously, we can also be thinking about what could have been. But good job, Paul. Good job taking the mythic rare that's splashable. That happens to be, what, the 2nd best Simic rare in the set? Good job. And we're going to try to draft a nice little teamer deck here. I don't want to take that many green cards though, okay? So I'm only taking the green cards that have the rare or mythic symbol on them. We'll just take an innocent, what? I just want to read this card. Enters battlefield, put a counter, okay. I have an extra innocent bystander. Oh, what does this do? It's a rare? It's got to be good. Instant and sorcery spells you cast cost 1. Oh, there's a galvanized. How are there 2 galvanizes in the pack? Anyways, this is the mind control, which is also really good. Whenever you cast an instant sorcery spell, draw a card. I don't think I have enough. I'm just going to take another galvanize. Which one, folks? Yeah, I'm going to take this one. All right. How many times have we all heard that joke now? Now that you can get duplicates out of the set, I've probably made that joke 10 times. I'm sure Kenji's made it a few times. I'm sure Corticalds has made it a few times. But hey, this was the first draft, all right? It was the first draft. Low-hanging fruit. So we have 4 galvanizes. And I will take this orangutan. I want to try this one out too. Just because we're going to be able to make a bunch of clues, I think. I actually don't even know. But presumably. This one channels our mana. Although it seems quite weak, so I don't think I'm going to play it. How many Nervous Gardeners would we have had in this draft? We would have had like 3 Nervous Gardeners, maybe 4. Incredible Fixing, 4 galvanizes on the splash with it. I mean, our mana would have been so good, we could have just legitimately been straight 3 colors with a green base. Man, that's a lot of Nervous Gardeners. There's another orangutan. What does this do? To search your library for a basic land card, reveal it. There are 5 colors among permanents. Okay. That's never going to happen. So I guess I'll just take the orangutan here. And then now we have... I already have a Jaded Analyst, so we'll just mix up our 2 drops here. All right. And we'll see how this goes. We will see how this goes. All right. We can fast forward this to the actual end product. Okay. So let's take a look here. The first thing that stands out to me is the lack of 2s. I'm taking a look at our sideboard here. We have a Projector Inspector there, along with an Out Cold, and we're playing double Gearbane Orangutan. So there's a lot of cards here that I really, really was off on or incorrect about, right? Gearbane Orangutan, not really something you want to be playing in your blue-red deck. Certainly should be playing Projector Inspector over the Orangutan, especially given the bombs that we have. We want to be looting into it. Benthic Criminologist, definitely a card we can at least play maybe 1 copy of, especially if we're looking to play cards like the Crime Novelist, but we also have the Satchel, so that's something to consider. Candlestick should definitely not be in this deck. And the Crime Novelist, the Innocent Bystanders, oof, yes. So just a lot of little things, right? Just with regards to mana curve, Innocent Bystander, not what you want it to. I definitely should have put a higher emphasis and a higher priority on the 2 mana cards. The things that come to mind for me is we should have at least definitely had a Sanitation Automaton. We definitely could have had, what else? The Pyrotechnic Performer. We certainly should be playing this Projector Inspector. So I think with this particular build, I think we wanted to really test the limits of how many Investigate cards can we play, and let's play all the payoff cards just to see how it plays out. And ultimately, I think this deck was fine. It wasn't that bad. We had 4 Galvanizes, a Satchel, Case of the Burning Masks, 2 awesome Simic cards, a Gleaming Geardrake, but this deck certainly could have been much, much, much better. But all things considered, with the exception of me not knowing that green was open, when it was very open, I think this deck is still probably, a B-, C+. If I were to watch, if I was, let's say, coaching somebody or what have you, and I saw this draft, and I were to rate their draft based on all the information that I know now, yeah, this is a C-. This is a C-. If I were to follow the draft and see the picks that they made and see what's in my sideboard, you see the Out Cold, the Projector Inspector, those should definitely be in. And we see the Crime Novelist, the Gearbane Orangutans, and having to play a couple of Innocent Bystanders as your 2s is also pretty weak. But, look, for the first draft, I thought it was fine. For the first draft, I think this was okay, given I didn't know any of the cards. But if I were to see somebody draft this now, definitely could use some improvement here. But had we just been base green, this would have been a deck with Doppelgang, 3 or 4 Nervous Gardeners, with a bunch of Collect Evidence cards, Eavesdroppers, what have you. I think it took me, along with basically everybody else, a little bit of time to realize that green was the second best color. And everybody instead, whenever a set comes out, everybody just gravitates towards removal spells. So you know what cards people took early that much higher than they should have? Slice from the Shadows, Murder, Extract the Confession, Shock, Galvanize, Makeshift Binding. Those are the cards that people are taking highly, right? But Tunnel Tipster, Loxodon Eavesdropper, Vitu-Ghazi Inspector, Nervous Gardener, when you look at those cards, they don't kill things. So people take them a little bit lower when in fact you should be taking Nervous Gardener over Murder. You should be taking Nervous Gardener over Slice, right? Galvanize versus Nervous Gardener is kind of close. So, but in the beginning, this is just the case because you go back to kind of your old heuristics where it's just like, well, what's worked out for me in the past is I just draft a deck with good removal and I'll figure out the creatures later. It'll take some time to figure out which creatures slot best, right? Look at my deck. I had 2 Crime Novelists and 2 Gearbane Orangutans. I clearly had no idea what the good creatures were in this format. But with spells, Galvanize, hey, look, I valued it highly back then. It's still very good right now. It's still a card you want to play as many copies of as you need. But of course, evaluations have changed. Now I'm taking Person of Interest over Galvanize in a lot of instances where day one, something I likely wouldn't have done. But hey, that was the first draft. I think overall it went okay. Let's take a look at the second draft. All right, so I'm going to cheat a little bit here. I'm going to pick my third draft only because my second draft also was like an Is It deck. So I'm trying something. I'm doing the third draft just because it changes things up. And one thing I forgot, by the way, and which I noticed when I watched when I watched the intro of this video, is I did forget that if you enjoyed this content, I did launch my Patreon channel. Shout out to all the current patrons. Really do appreciate all of your support. The link is in the description below. Definitely a great way to, support this channel. And also, if you enter the Discord, really building a really good community there. So once again, shout out to all the patrons. Really do appreciate all of you. All right, let's head into this draft. The title for this draft was True Azorius Detective. I thought that title was good because it was when True Detective came out, but just didn't hit. It's okay. Learning a lot about how to make good thumbnails. All right, let's go. And let's hope to continue climbing for rank 1. Now, hopping into this pack here, let's take a look at this rare. Etrata, Deadly Fugitive. 1 blue-black for a Death Touch 1/4. Face down creatures you control have 2 blue-black. Turn this creature face up. If you can't, exile it. Then you may cast the exiled card without paying its mana cost. Whenever an assassin you control deals combat damage to opponent, cloak the top card of that player's library. Ooh, that's interesting. It's a 3-mana 1/4. I don't know how many assassins there are in this set, though. But I kind of want to take it. Dogwalker, Cold Case Cracker are actually good commons. And then there's also the Gleaming Gear Drake. And as kind of the best uncommon in this pack, Evidence Examiner is also interesting. At the beginning of combat, on your turn, you make evidence for and investigate. This card's okay. You have to evidence for to then pay 2 mana to draw a card. I'd much rather have the Gleaming Gear Drake, but I want to try out this rare. We're still kind of in the phase of wanting to try out all these different rares, but I can see the case at some point later to maybe take some of the other cards. Okay, so obviously, Evidence Examiner is not just okay. Evidence Examiner is incredible. I think I also missed the part about the card where you get a clue whenever you collect evidence. Not in my mind, it's just I have to collect evidence for to make a clue. But of course, this is incredible because you can play a Vitu-Ghazi Inspector. You can cast Bite Down on Crime and draw a card. So Evidence Examiner would be a strong consideration. I don't fault myself for taking Etrata. I think, heck, if I even made videos today, I would take the Etrata just because it's a really, really cool and unique card. By the way, I think it's the only assassin in the set. Oh no, there are other assassins. There's a repeat offender. I didn't even know. That's how often I draft the Etrata. So that's actually insane. Look at this. I'm learning something about the format now. You can go turn 2 repeat offender, turn 3 Etrata, bam. So that is something awesome. But yes, I think I would have taken the Etrata. Now, let's say I was playing in the Arena Championship, play for $2,000. What do I take then? Well, taking a first pick gold card is a little bit dicey. So then I'd probably be looking at taking the most flexible cards. And so for me, the 2 most flexible cards in this pack are Novice Inspector and Dogwalker. Now, Novice Inspector is a higher win rate card, but Dogwalker does give you the flexibility of playing it in both a red or white deck. So I think the actual pick is likely between those 2 cards. If you really, really wanted to do well. Maybe it's the Dogwalker. I think in Boros, it's close, actually, which card even is better. And again, Dogwalker is a card that's good in both your red and white decks, whereas the Novice Inspector, of course, is only good in your white decks. All right, moving on here. I see a Drag the Canal to follow up this Etrata. That's really exciting. I mean, Drag the Canal is actually one of the best Dimir rares in the set, so... But let's start with the Etrata. So let me just read this one more time. If you can't... Face down creatures, you have... So all your morphs cost 4 mana to turn face up. And if you can't, exile it. Then you... So the one thing I missed about this card when I was reading it, and it took me a while to actually figure it out, is... when you pay the 4 mana here, you can actually just cast... If you cloaked like a spell, like a removal spell, you can pay 4 mana to cast the spell if you wanted, which is something that I missed. It didn't make sense to me at the time, but now of course it does. You may cast the exile card without paying its... I'm not exactly sure what that means. I'll have to ask somebody to figure that out. Drag the Canal. Create a 2/2 white and blue detective creature token at instant speed. If a creature died this turn, you gain 2 life, surveil 2, and investigate. Oh, yes. I mean, we started out with a blue-black mythic with an assassin. Let's take another blue-black card here. Cards to consider are Tin Street Gossip and Galvanize, which is a premium removal spell in the format. Fairy Snoop is also really good as just a way to gain value, but I think I want to try out this rare. This, I mean, for 2 mana, you trade with something and then you make a 2/2, gain 2, surveil 2, and you make a clue. That seems like a ton of value for a 2 mana card, so it is. It's a ton of value, and that's exactly the reason why it's such a high win rate card. You trade with anything. I mean, the floor is you can play a 2 mana 2/2 as a flash creature, but you almost never want to do that. But whenever you trade, you get value. And when you use a removal spell to kill something, you get value. I mean, for 2 mana, a 2/2 that draws you a card and surveils 2 is incredible. So this is basically I want to say the dream Dimir start. One low light I'm going to give myself is not calling out Fuss Bother as a good option, because Fuss Bother ultimately ended up being one of the best uncommon cards in the set. I want to try that here and solidify myself in a blue-black deck. Let's take a look at this card, Fuss and Bother. We can't really play the Fuss half of this, given that we're blue-black. So is Bother good enough? 6 mana to make 3 Thopters, and Surveil 2 doesn't seem strong enough as a card if you can't use the Fuss ability on that. There's Deadly Complication, which is a nice removal spell, but it's red, and I don't know if I want to go 3 colors immediately. And then there's Meddling Youths, which is a 5 mana 4/5 haste. When you attack with 3 or more creatures, investigate. That's okay. I think I'm just going to go ahead and take Slice from the Shadows. It's just a removal spell. It's nothing especially special. But we'll note that because it can't be countered, it does kill disguise creatures at even mana rate. So for 3 mana, you can kill a morph, and you don't have to pay extra mana to do so. And so, I mean, given this start, it's not bad necessarily to take Slice from the Shadows. I will say that it is significantly worse than Novice Inspector as a card. But given that we started with Etrata plus Drag the Canal, I guess Slice definitely makes some sense, right? Taking a removal spell to clear the way, because imagine starting with a turn 3 Etrata on the play and then they play something or what have you. Having the ability to slice something and then continue hitting them with the Etrata makes a lot of sense. So I think given the first 2 picks, I could see definitely the case for the Slice from the Shadows. Now, had we first picked the Dogwalker, right? Had we first picked the Dogwalker, we could have then second picked Fuss Bother, right? We could have second picked Fuss Bother to go with the Dogwalker, and then ultimately ended. Let's see, and then maybe take another Dogwalker. Excuse me, maybe take Novice Inspector, and that would have probably been just a way better deck. And we would have just had the Nuts Boros deck. But at the time, draft 3, everything is equal territory. We don't know what the best color combination is. So given that, you just kind of you just go with the flow of the draft, right? You just go with the flow of the draft. That's the one thing that I noticed in this format is it does feel super awkward having removal against morphs. Because when you play against the morphs, or the disguise cards, you usually have to pay more mana to kill the disguise creatures, and it feels pretty bad. Going into this pack, we have Dogwalker and Reckless Detective as kind of the best cards, but they're not blue or black. This could be a sign that maybe red is open, and now I want to be looking into being some kind of an aggressive red deck, but I mean, with our first 3 picks, I don't want to abandon my first 3 picks right away. So as much as I like these cards, I'd rather just take the Thundering Falls. I think the Surveil lands are just great, even if you share one of the colors. And if I'm going to be maybe a blue-black controlling deck, red is probably the most likely card that I want to splash for other removal spells. So I can't really argue with the thought process there, given our start, right? Given our start, like this pack clearly is a Boros pack, right? There's Reckless Detective and Dogwalker, and had we started the draft with the Dogwalker into Fuss Bother, Novice Inspector, into Reckless Detective Dogwalker, this would have been an absurd start. That being said, this is not a bad Dimir start, and given the cards that we have so far, it's still pretty hard to move away from Etrata and Drag the Canal. So taking the Thundering Falls makes some sense because, hey, it's possible you want to splash the red. And if you want to draft a controlling deck, this is kind of where you can go. I mean, Reckless Detective is definitely a very, very good card. And seeing at 4th pick could mean that red is open. Could also consider the Dogwalker if you want to keep yourself flexible, but I don't know. Maybe at this point you just take the Reckless Detective. But given our start, Thundering Falls also seems fine. So I'm going to take the Thundering Falls, but then just keep an eye out for other things. And wow, look at this pack. This is the detective pack. I mean, look at this. Private Eye, Inside Source, Market Watch Phantom, and Case of the Pilfer Proof. That is ridiculous. There's no blue or black card for us in this pack. So I think I'm simply just going to take the best card. And and what's the best card? I will say this. If when playing against the detective deck, this card seemed to be the most impactful, although this card needs less detectives to be good. So I'm going to take the Private Eye here because it's an Anthem creature that if the detective deck is open, it's going to be great. I think the 2-mana Saga is better if you're all in on detectives, but this card is also just a 3-mana 3/3. So I'm going to just play it here. Maybe it's a card we can splash if we get enough detectives in blue and black. All right, so Case of the Pilfer Proof, definitely a card that I was extremely wrong about. I think in the beginning, you may have been able to pull off detectives deck that have like 14 or 15 detectives, and the card ended up being fine. But I think as the format progressed, you just don't get Seasoned Consultants and Market Watch Phantoms as easily anymore. And when you draw a Case of the Pilfer Proof in the late game, it just doesn't do anything. Private Eye is like 10 times the card that the Case is. So Private Eye was definitely the pick out of that pack. White certainly seems really, really open here. So when I took that Thundering Falls, perhaps the correct pick there was to just take Dogwalker in case we have to pivot into a second color. And at that time, we don't know if that color is going to be red or white, right? So given that we don't know that the pivot has to be red or white, you take the Dogwalker because that gives us more flexibility as we move into the draft. Because let's say we take the Dogwalker out of that pack, right? Then moving into the next pack, maybe we just take the Inside Source. Right? It's a bit of a safer pick to take the Inside Source after the Dogwalker so that we end up in white, because we could end up black-white, we could end up red-white. There's still a lot more flexibility there instead of taking something like the Private Eye. Okay. Now there is Seasoned Consultant, but that's not too strong. I'm going to take Curious Cadaver out of this pack. It just seems like a great creature. 4-mana, 3/1 flyer. When you sack a clue, you can return it from your graveyard to your hand. We have a Drag the Canal to make a clue already. There's also Deduce. Sample Collector is a card I've been pretty impressed by. Just collecting evidence is fairly easy, but look, this is a blue-black card. It's the Signpost Uncommon. I got to take it here. Yeah, so as you can see, I'm just trying. This is kind of the point where I'm just trying my best to get a grasp for the format, and whenever I see... Usually when you see a gold uncommon that's on the color that you're looking to be, it's going to be very powerful. So as a result, I mean, you look at Curious Cadaver, you don't know that the format's super fast. You look at Curious Cadaver and you go, wow, this card gives you a lot of value. You trade and then you crack a clue and it comes back. So, and it flies and it hits pretty hard. So for all those reasons, I wanted to take the Cadaver, and given what we have so far, yeah, still makes sense to take the Cadaver out of that pack. Moving on, there is a pack with, let's see, Projector Inspector, which is another detective card. So I wonder if the blue-black deck is also a detective deck. And then there is the Clandestine Meddler, which is better in a more aggressive strategy if you're looking to be maybe a red-black deck. That's something that I'd be interested in. Do I want to take something like a Sanguine Survivor? I think I'm just going to take the Projector Inspector in case I do somehow end up in a blue-white detective deck or a blue-black detective deck, maybe. So let's try to draft for synergy here. Case of the Gorgon's Kiss. When this enters the battlefield, destroy up to one target creature that was dealt damage. To solve, 3 or more creatures were put into graveyards from anywhere this turn. That seems interesting, but I think Toxin Analysis is actually a pretty good combat trick. Target creature gets Death Touch and Lifelink, and you get to investigate. And of course, investigating is good with the Curious Cadaver. So I think I'm going to take the combat trick out of that pack. Yeah, I mean, this is shaping up nice, right? Outside of the Private Eye, this is looking like a really good start to a Dimir control deck. And I don't really see a reason to go away from that, given that what we have so far here. And move on from there. Here, that's a late Evidence Examiner, which means blue-green is probably open, but blue-green rarely is good. Magnetic Snuffler returns equipment from your graveyard to the battlefield. That's okay. What about Rot Farm Mortipede? Whenever one or more creatures leave your graveyard, this gets +1/+0, menace and lifelink. I mean, it's a filler creature, but maybe if we have a lot of ways to not investigate. What's the other thing where you exile cards from your graveyard? It's collect evidence. It's collect evidence, Paul. And remember that one line that I said about Simic not being good? Well, this was one of the few sets in a very long time where Simic ultimately ended up being the second best archetype behind Red-White. So it was Red-White and then Simic as number 2. So at the time, you can't necessarily fault me for thinking that Simic was going to be bad because Simic has just always been bad in almost every draft set. But in this format in particular, Simic ended up being quite strong. And I think in that last pack, definitely I should have just taken the Evidence Examiner on the spec. It works really nicely with the Etrata. Sultai is a very good color combination. I just need to make sure I can find some ways to fix for it if that's the case. Certainly over something like a Rot Farm Mortipede, which is highly replaceable and not especially good in blue-black. I'm still learning all the terms. That's something that I might want to be doing. Here, I'll take the combat trick here with Investigate. I don't think that I'm going to be blue-white. I think that was just a random pack that had a ton of detective payoff type cards, but that doesn't seem to be the direction that we're leaning in now. None of these cards interest me. I'll take a Slime Against Humanity here. And now we have Cerebral Confiscation, which I don't think I'm ever going to play. I'll take the Tracker in case it is a detective. If we end up blue-white, the Tracker can be good. We have a Private Eye, a Griffnut Tracker, a Projector Inspector, and an Auspicious Arrival for the blue-white deck. I mean, if you look at it, our black wasn't very good. So black could definitely be cut here. All right, let's move on to this next pack. When Cryptic Coat enters a battlefield, cloak the top card of your library. So it's a free creature, then attach Cryptic Coat to it. A creature gets +1/+0 and can't be blocked. And then I can return this to my hand. Oh, wow, that card seems awesome. There's Murder, but I'm really interested in this card. So it's a 3-mana, 3/2 unblockable. And then for 2 mana, I can bounce this to my hand, and then for 3 mana, I can make another creature. Yeah, absolutely, this is what I want. Cryptic Coat seems great. I do love me a Murder, but I want the 3/2 unblockable creature that I can rebuy. Yes. Oh, my sweet summer child. That moment when you first read the best blue rare in the set, right? You read all the lines of text, and then you put the pieces together. You're like, yep. You put the pieces together and you realize, oh yeah, this card is bonkers. This card is busted. What opens? Etrata and Cryptic Coat with Drag the Canal? What a start here. Lucky Cheon, as they say. More of that, please. This pack, that's as far as blue and black cards, fairly weak. Case of the Locked Hothouse, I will note, was really, really impressive when I tried playing this in kind of a green controlling ramp deck. Once you solve this, it just goes completely insane. It is a little bit slow, though, will note. Crawl Whipcracker is great, kills clues, but can't really cast it. So I think here, I'm just going to go ahead and take a Dramatic Accusation just as a not great kind of just removal spell, but we're kind of light on removal. So we'll just take this here and see where things go. I definitely want to be blue, so I don't think I want to take a second Toxin Analysis this early. I want to have a little variety in the types of spells that I play. Yeah, so Dramatic Accusation ended up being really poor, and it's never something you want to take that early, particularly in blue-black, which already just has a lot of removal. I mean, that was a pretty weak pack. I think I just take a second copy of Toxin Analysis there, and then we just kind of reevaluate. Like, you take the second copy of the Toxin Analysis, and then if you pick up cards like Unscrupulous Agent, Leering Onlooker, Fairy Snoop, Toxin Analysis goes really, really well with those cards. So I think I would have just taken that. And also just having more ways to make clues is certainly nice when you have something like Curious Cadaver in your deck. And now, wow, we have the option between Exit Specialist and Soul Enervation. Both are really, really good. Out Cold is also really nice, but this is better if you're kind of a more aggressively slanted tempo deck. And then there's also Escape Tunnel if I want fixing. But for me, I think it's pretty clearly between one of these two cards. Soul Enervation is just a really good removal spell. And then whenever you exile creatures from your yard, boom, you get to drain them. But Exit Specialist, I mean, this is a detective. It bounces things. You know, I'm going to take Exit Specialist as... I typically like -4/-4 kill a thing, but I want to try the Exit Specialist because who knows? Maybe I do end up blue-white. It was a clear Exit Specialist. Soul Enervation ended up just being all right. I think a lot of it is just like the sizing of the creatures in the set. And I mean, it's fine, but Exit Specialist is much, much better. Right? And if I do end up blue-white, Exit Specialist is going to be great in the Detective deck as well. And I just want to try to draft a synergistic deck if possible. Tolsimir is completely busted, but I am so far away from casting this. I mean, I guess there is a world where I'm blue-white splashing green. Right? I mean, I'm not missing out on too much here. The Criminologist is kind of medium. Accusation isn't that strong. I think Tolsimir is so good, I'm going to take it here and just kind of see where things go. Yeah, so that was a pretty greedy pick. Like, we passed a bunch of the white cards. At this point, I think it's just far too late to even consider switching to white. We already have some black cards. Granted, black didn't seem super open, but I think we just have enough where switching and trying to not play any of our black cards just for the sake of playing Tolsimir with no splash just is a little bit off to me. I think given that we're just kind of light on 2-mana cards in general, right? Take a look here. We only had the Exit Specialist. I don't really want to count Drag the Canal as a 2. And we have the Atrada, and we talked about that Assassin Synergy. I think you just take the Repeat Offender out of that pack, just so that you can kind of give yourself more opportunities at the insane draws where you go turn 2 Repeat Offender into turn 3 Atrada. I think we just take the 2-drop there. We're going to try to stay as flexible as possible here. And now I see a Makeshift Binding, which is a premium removal spell, and there's not a great blue or black card in this pack. So yeah, maybe we're going to be shifting gears here and try to go maybe blue-white. Yeah, so there, same thing. Probably should just take the Bubble Smuggler there and not just try to swap over to white. This was just really late. I mean, I think white was the right seat to be in pack 1, but like I said, I think it was a little bit too late. Still just pick up the 2-drops that we need for this deck just to make a nice cohesive strategy. You know, having Repeat Offender, Bubble Smuggler, and Exit Specialist as your 2s is at least something. Because right now, I mean, we only have Exit Specialist as like an OK 2. And I guess Drag the Canal. Splashing Tolsimir could be a thing. All right, what do we have here? Mill 3 cards, investigate. Each opponent mills 3 cards, then you may cast a spell from each opponent's graveyard without paying its mana cost. If a spell this way would be put into a graveyard, exile it instead. 2 mana, mill 3, investigate? Seems like it could be good. What is this? I mean, I definitely can't cast that card. I will mill 3 cards, investigate. I mean, if I want to put cards in my graveyard, this could be a reasonable thing. Yeah, so I mean, Flotsam Jetsam is okay, but Flotsam, it doesn't draw you the card right away. It's like 4 mana. If you play Flotsam, it's mill yourself, pay 4 mana to draw a card, which is not a great rate. Jetsam can be okay. I think I would have just taken the Gravestone Strider there to go with this Thundering Falls. That gives me at least an opportunity to splash for a bomb that I might open later, and gives me another 2-drop for my deck. And now I'm going to take Granite Witness out of this pack. It's a detective, excellent creature. Happy to have it here. And now we're kind of shifting gears here. We're blue-white now. This Atrada might not be played. And this Curious Cadaver as well. We'll see if this works out here. And now we have the choice between Meticulous Archive and Crime Stopper Sprite. I think I'm going to be a little bit short on playables here. So I think I'm going to prioritize the blue detective creature instead of something like the land. Yeah, so I think this was also kind of the point where I thought blue-white detectives was one of the best archetypes. So I definitely had a strong bias into moving into that direction, as you can tell. So that's why you're kind of seeing the shift. Another thing is black was very, very overdrafted in this draft. Right now in the beginning, nobody knows what color is best, right? So everybody's just going into black because they see some of those removal spells, not recognizing that the creatures are terrible and that removal is not necessarily all you want to be focusing on in this format. Typically, I like the land more, but because we made kind of this shift really late and we're shifting over to a blue-white detective deck, I think I just need to take playables out of the packs that I see. So Evolving Wilds would be super nice so that I can actually play this card, if possible. And apologies, I'm going to keep referring to cards as older versions of cards just until I actually memorize the card names. Here we have, so now Fuss and Bother actually becomes good in our deck, right? Before I didn't take it because I couldn't play white, but now I can. So if I'm blue-white, I think Fuss and Bother is definitely better than something like a Hazda Vigilante. So we'll go ahead and take that. Fuss Bother, 11th pick. Get out of town. That's ridiculous. Also, by the way, I should have taken the Gravestone Strider just so I can splash the Tolsimir. So just like, at the time, I didn't even respect the Gravestone Strider at all. And here we are. But getting that Fuss Bother, like, what's funny is I think me making this pivot might have ended up giving me a better deck than had I just drafted this now. That's interesting. That. And now we made the pivot and we have 13 playables. So we're going to need a good last pack. Axebane Ferox, what do you do? 4 mana, Death Touch, Haste, Ward, collect evidence. What? 4 mana, 4/4, Death Touch, Haste. That seems awesome. There's a few black cards. None of these are especially good. Burden of Proof. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2 as long as it's a detective you control. Otherwise, it has base power and toughness 1/1 and can't block detectives. This seems like a nice card if you're looking to draft detectives, right? It's just a combat trick that can also kill things. So I'll take that, although I've heard good things about Out Cold, so that's also a thing I could take. And then there's also an Escape Tunnel in this pack. But like I said before, this seems good in the detective deck, so I want to try it out. Yeah, so look, if we're looking to make the pivot at this point, and we're trying to, like, once we make the pivot, you're supposed to try to play Tolsimir. And if that's what you're trying to do, you take Escape Tunnel out of that pack, right? You take the Escape Tunnel. Burden of Proof is fine. Out Cold is fine. But if I'm looking to make this hard pivot into white, you just have to take Escape Tunnel. This is just really, really greedy. I needed to take the Escape Tunnel out of that pack. Now, if I was kind of that blue-black deck from, if I just drafted the deck the way that I wanted, if I was just straight blue-black, that would have been a little bit closer. I could have taken Out Cold, Persuasive Interrogators, or the Escape Tunnel. It's a little hard to visualize what my deck would look like. Maybe still just take the Out Cold. I think the card is just very, very good. So that's probably what I would have taken. But here I definitely needed to take the Escape Tunnel with this blue-white deck. All right. Now we have a Wrath. Each player who controls the most creatures investigates, then destroy all creatures. But this doesn't seem like a deck that wants Wrath, right? I think I'm a deck that's looking to play a bunch of creatures. So I don't know that I want this card. I think I just want to take the detective payoff cards. I'm a little bit light on 2 mana cards. Yeah, I have literally no 2-drops. So I'm going to take the Perimeter Enforcer here. Not on my watch, and No Witnesses is also interesting, but I want to make sure I have enough detectives. I also really like the Cold Case Cracker, but I'm going to take the Perimeter Enforcer just for curve considerations. And boom, now we have another Private Eye. All right, loving that. Now, if something says detective on it, I'm going to take it. All right, good picks. Good picks so far. The Wrath ended up being terrible. No Witnesses is just not a card that you should be looking to draft. The fact that you give them a clue just makes it so that the card just doesn't give you that much value, and there's just a lot of instances where it's not that great. If you're ahead, it's bad. If you're at parity, it's bad. If you're slightly behind, it's not that good. You have to be really behind for that card to actually end up being great, so I'm glad that I didn't even consider taking the Sweeper out of that pack. Do any of you say detective? Nope, that's a blue-green card, so we can't take that one. All right, well, that's unfortunate. I'll just take a morph card here. The Vigilante is okay, but I think we have enough stuff to do once we get to a lot of mana. And are we a little bit light on 3 mana cards, actually? No, not necessarily, but this has evasion. I'll take the Defenestrated Phantom over How's the Vigilante. Once again, look, before it even went, no consideration for Gravestone Strider. We're light on 2-drops. We want to splash the Tolsimir, and I took one of the worst face-down creatures in the entire set over a Gravestone Strider, which would 1000% have made our deck, and made our deck better. Oh, and this is a blink of a pack. Case of the Burning Masks, by the way, is incredible. You should always look to take this one pretty highly. It's a 3-mana saga, or case rather, that kills something. And then when you get to deal damage with 3 different sources, you get to basically draw a card. It's super, super strong. Nothing here for us. I guess we'll take a magnifying glass, but not really looking to play it in this deck. Here there is a thinking cap, which I think is going to be pretty decent in our deck. Not really interested in a 5-mana creature here, so we'll go ahead and take that. So yeah, I think we would have probably gone with, if we just stayed Dimir, which I don't think it would have been, ultimately, I don't think the Dimir deck would have ended up great, but I would have just taken another Repeat Offender there into the Persuasive Interrogators, just to at least kind of fill out the rest of my deck. But certainly not even seeing a ton of Dimir removal spells here, which at this point in the format you would see late murders and extracts and slices, but early on you're just not seeing anything like that. We have, 18 cards in our deck, and then one of them is a Tolsimir that we may not be able to play. So definitely need to make sure we get enough playables. That's a Detective, and it's a Morph. I'm going to take that over the second Thinking Cap, I believe. I think unmorphing this is pretty strong, hitting people with this, because we have 1, 2, 3 disguise cards. So we don't have a ton, and it's always nice to have, four rather. It's always nice to have, I want to say 5 to 6 disguise cards, because it just gives you mana sinks in the late game, and that there's definitely value there. Okay, I'm going to take another Crime Stopper Sprite over Deduce. Although that deck yesterday, I would have taken the Deduce. Some nice Izzet control. Now the question is, do I have big things to collect evidence with? That is another reason, by the way, to play these large disguise creatures, because you're just happy to trade these creatures, and then when you have collect evidence cards, all of a sudden you get to collect evidence because you traded your 3-drop, but it's actually a 6-drop from your graveyard. I'll take a Defenestrated Phantom out of this pack. Man, Person of Interest and Red Herring with that many cards left. People still figuring stuff out there. But had we ended up being the blue-black deck, I probably would have just taken like a Deduce over maybe the second Crime Stopper Sprite there, something along those lines. But yeah, ultimately, I don't know that my deck would have ended up being better than this, but I think I would have had enough playables. And like I said, the Gravestone Striders I definitely should have taken. Give us another 6, and then here I'll take Museum Nightwatch. This is just a nice card to just play on turn 4. You just play this turn 4, and then you trade with something, and then you get a Detective. So I do like that over the Undercover Crocodile. One of these days I'll get that one correct. And then I'll take, I do like Chalk Outline if you're green, but I'm going to take On the Job here. I think it could be a decent, it replaces itself, which is nice. So I think it could be a decent option. There's a Gravestone Strider. I might actually play this and try to play this Tolsimir, just because Tolsimir is so strong. Yeah, you should have done that way earlier. You're just lucky nobody knows how good that card is. Well, I'm not saying the card is great. I'm just saying it's very important for this deck, so that you can actually find a way to play the Tolsimir without having to play like 3 forests. And if we're light on playables anyways, that's something we might want to do. Okay, so this is the deck that we have laid out. All right, so let's take a look here. Ultimately, I think this deck ended up being okay, but it is still light on 2-mana cards. We have 3 2-drops. That is pretty bad. So we could have had another Gravestone Strider, which would have given us 4 2s. We would have still been pretty light on 2s. I didn't see that many more opportunities to take 2s. But however, if we still stayed the course with our blue-black deck, right, we would have had Drag the Canal, a couple of Repeat Offenders, as well for 2-mana plays. So I think we would have had probably more 2-mana plays. We would have still been able to play the Atrata. And, honestly, I think it would have been kind of close which one ended up being better. But given the fact that this deck has 2 copies of Private Eye with some detectives, and it's splashing the Tolsimir, although the cost is very high, the 3 forests, I'm not sure actually which one ended up being better. I think it's close, but Drag the Canal and Entrada are really, really good. So I just don't know that the white cards that we ended up with was necessarily good enough to warrant kind of warping our deck in this fashion. Because take a look at, we have 2 Private Eyes, which is very, very good. Close, I would say. 2 Private Eyes versus Atrata and Drag the Canal, I would say is kind of close. But, how many games is Tolsimir going to win us versus how many games is it going to lose us because our mana is so bad, right? Because we're trying to fit this into our deck. That's the thing. You remember all the times you cast the Tolsimir and it wins you the game because obviously when you cast it, it has a tremendous impact on the battlefield. But then there are games where you're just like, wow, I drew my forest and I couldn't play my Crime Stopper sprite in turn 3, right? And that's just going to happen a good amount of the time with how bad the mana for this deck is. So I think this deck would have been a lot better if we just made sure that we prioritized mana fixing a little bit higher. And had we ended up with a second copy of the Gravestone Strider to go along with the Escape Tunnel, that would have gone a really long way. Because if we have 2 Gravestone Striders and an Escape Tunnel, we just need to play 1 forest, right? We just need to play 1 forest instead of 3. And that I think that would have heavily impacted the outcome of this deck. And ultimately, had I done that, I do think that this deck likely would have been better than the blue-black deck just because of how not open black was. So I think we actually made a decent pivot. I just think we just didn't prioritize the mana fixing highly enough. So this one, definitely going to give myself a higher score on this one. Given what I saw over the course of this draft, I'll give this one a solid B. If I saw somebody draft something like this, I'll give this a B, maybe a B minus, right? We took the Fenestrated Phantom when that's just a card I almost never want in my deck. But outside of that, I mean, you know, we spec'd on the Private Eye. It was the most powerful card in that pack, and it ended up paying off for us. So ultimately, I think this deck looks okay. Could have been better, but not too many big complaints. It's not as bad as passing a 4th pick Doppelgang, all right? It's not as bad as passing a 4th pick Doppelgang because my reading comprehension is not high. But hey, you know, there's a lot to learn. And I think this was kind of fun, just kind of going back to see my first 2 drafts and looking at all the mistakes that were made along the way and seeing how the formats evolved over time and me learning a lot while playing all these different cards, looking at win rates. And of course, we are in a much different spot now than we were 2 months ago when things started. But yeah, let me know what you think. Just trying something a little bit different here because we're kind of in that lull between MKM and everybody just looking at OTJ spoilers now and trying to figure out what's good in OTJ. So I just wanted to use this video as kind of my final video with regards to MKM content, right? We had our final draft yesterday, and this one is now my final draft. Not final draft, my final video with regards to MKM, just kind of going over what it was like right at the start and where I thought, you know, what my evaluation of cards were back then and kind of where I am now, which is, of course, ideally a much better drafter than I was day 1 or day 2 of the format. Anyways, once again, let me know what you think. Trying stuff out here. If you've enjoyed this content, I did launch my Patreon channel. Shout out to all the current patrons. Really do appreciate all of your support. The link is in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you tomorrow.